everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar. It's 10 a.m. here in London, and we're spread across the world to our guests, which are today Chris Godfrey, Bidisha Sinha, and Ben Johnson, and we'll be joined later by Dara Huang. And so I'm just going to say hello to each of you and welcome. So Chris, good morning.
Hey, Vanessa, good morning. And good morning, everyone. Good evening from my side. Yeah.
Oh wait, Chris, you're in
Singapore. So
you're in Singapore. Oh, we've got a concrete grey sky here in London this morning, so you've probably got sunshine.
Yeah, daily. I shouldn't gloat, but yeah.
And Ben, are you in London?
I'm just outside London, so I'm at home in Oxfordshire. The studio is in London though, so our studio, Albion Nord, is in London, yes.
Great. And Bidisha, you cover the world, so...
Well, no, I'm right now, I'm in London working from home as everyone else, but yeah, you're right. I've been through a few places for the last 2 years being in Hong Kong, but yeah, definitely back in London, back at home, working from home right now.
So we're going to start just to have a little chat, first of all, with Chris, and then we'll come round to everybody and we'll speak to you, Ben, and Bidisha, you, and then Dara. And then we'll close up the session today with some questions from our audience who are watching. And that's being moderated by the SBID team, because obviously there'll be some questions that will be asked in duplicate by different people. So they will sort of slim that down, and then we can ask those questions one by one at the end. Okay, so Chris, let's start with you. You're in the hot seat.
No problem.
So you are, tell us a bit, first of all, about HBA.
Okay, so HBA is a 55-year-old design company. It's born out of LA in the mid-60s, 1963. And its first project was the Beverly Hills Rodeo, so now a very, very famous hotel. But at that time, hotels didn't really exist as we now know them for, in terms of branded hotels. And they really helped create the blueprint for what most of the branded hotels are today by taking turning the motel into a boutique and bespoke designed luxury environment that could be developed as a brand and globalized. So yeah, very interesting firm. They've been around a long time and have moved progressively eastwards over the 70s and 80s, from West Coast America to the East Coast with the advent of Atlantic City and the gaming on the East Coast, and then London in 85, Hong Kong in 85, and mainland China from the mid-90s. So they've really been at the vanguard of some new economies, some developing economies, and I guess that's it. Where there's hotels and tourism springing up is typically at the fore. So very progressive company. Now they're in 22 countries from LA to Tokyo, so very geographically spread, and have expanded beyond five-star hospitality to offer a range of different services as well, which I can talk a little bit more on later on. But so yeah, quite a dynamic group, geographically spread, typologically spread, but always working in the, for want of a better description, the luxury sector, sort of the higher end of the architecture and interior design market. And
you're a trained architect that's sort of morphed into more interior design. I mean, I've always said that we're the ones with the money, we're the ones that make the money, because an architect builds it once and we come back every 5 years and refurbish it. So we do better as designers in terms of business.
That's true.
How do you, now you're in the residential section of luxury of design, and you're based in Singapore.
In Singapore, correct, yeah.
What was your journey that took you into that?
Well, the journey is a relatively long one. I'll try and be brief. But yeah, you're right. Graduating as an architect and moving to London straight after graduation, working for a couple of practices, doing very interesting residential projects, and that's so from graduation it became my point of interest, if you like. I was lucky enough to set up my first company really young at 29. I set up my Scape Architects, as was called there. And as you know, as a young practitioner in London, which is a very competitive market, you don't start building architectures. I started doing furniture and small rooms and interiors and extensions, and slowly growing back to architecture. And it's taken me a long time and a kind of winding road to get there. But I think fast forwarding to the now, or rather to 7 years ago when I came out here, that was definitely one of the draws for me, was how I'd recognized through my travels into Asia just how great the opportunities are out here to build as a practicing architect, also what I wanted to, and to express yourself creatively. Just that was the draw for me. And I think, say, having been an architect working in interiors and having this model that we did develop in London as to how to pull everything together, architecture, interior, furniture, that was the kind of language that I was developing in my last years in London, but definitely saw this as an opportunity to advance that and to upscale the project size, really, to test that modus.
So that for me is the key as part of your journey. Yeah. You went to Singapore 6-7 years ago, and you've built an HBA brand there. How many staff do you have in your practice there?
So yeah, we're about 80 globally currently, and we're about 36 in Singapore here. We have three people in China on the ground in the mainland China, about 24 in London, and 24 in India. So yeah, that kind of number.
So you actually are a very substantial global brand. And to go into a new market when it's not your home birthplace, do you speak the language, by the way, when you arrived? Did you?
Oh no, far from. I mean, luckily, Singapore is referred to as Asia Light. It's obviously it was under Britain until 1961. So English is first language, really. So that was a light introduction to Asia. I'm trying to learn Mandarin now, but it's a small smattering. But yeah, I came out on my own effectively with family, but from a business perspective, it was a standing start. But as said, I took that leap of faith, having been out here progressively over the 2 prior years, and getting a taste for the opportunities here. And I think I was just thinking about it before the start of the call. Obviously London is an epicenter, and but typically all roads lead into London. This. Yeah. And when I was coming out here, I was seeing that Singapore is a hub, but it's more about going out. It's sort of fundamentally same and different. And I was seeing how interconnected everybody was here, and how outward they were in their thinking and reach. And that was something that, yeah, as a creative and someone with that kind of spirit of endeavor, really appealed to me. Just a different approach to doing business, to reaching out, to feeling like you can. And as I say, that came to me at a certain point in career, where, having been in London for 20 years, really, it felt like a really positive opportunity to take, to challenge what I knew, to learn new culture, but also to expand one's horizons professionally and personally. And so that for me was, with HBA, was the perfect vehicle, because they are a truly global group, but they're also largely just made up of a whole number of boutique entities, 26 offices around the world. So it suits me perfectly in having that, that boutique scale ultimately, but with the infrastructure and the outreach of a company of that kind of strength.
And just very quickly, have you got any tips for anybody who's watching today as to how they can sort of break into, for Western companies, if you like, to break into the China-Asia market for design?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's quite difficult to talk about that in the now, because everybody's confined, or largely confined. But I would say the benefit that I've had is by coming out here and traversing around and meeting people and making real relationships and and working hard to build our credentials from within the region as opposed to from out with. And I think that going forward, obviously, there's a global narrative of each country doing things for themselves currently, and you know, putting themselves first. And we see that, and therefore we see the necessity to have people based in the countries that we want to do work in. So whilst that might be quite hard to institute at this moment in time, I think that's definitely has been the HBA model, and it's something that I've perpetuated, how we dot people around and can genuinely service our projects. You know, we're not just providing paper designs that we hope someone will deliver. We're carrying those through to execution. So having, so being on the ground in terms of building relationships, but also being on the ground in terms of realizing projects is very important.
Great, great. So Ben, let's come to you. Ben.
Hi.
Hi. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you face as a sort of architecture and interior design practice in the year of 2021 with a global pandemic still in full flow? I mean, we may we may have felt that we're coming to an end to it, but we never know if it's going to pop up again. So what would you?
I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That we're clearly in a pandemic, but the kind of the changes that the pandemic has kind of caused will have a ripple effect, I think, for quite some time, if not indefinitely. And I think that, I mean, the challenges to our industry as a very broad subject, and it's kind of all encompassing really, and it kind of touches on every you know, when I thought about that question and the challenge to our industry, you know, you think about clients and client relationships and gaining new ones and the effect of that. You know, obviously that's the lifeblood of, you know, of any design studio is new projects and clients, through to what we actually design in terms of how we design and what it is that we're now going to be designing moving into 21 in terms of the residential sector, which is predominantly we work in, and also the hospitality that we've just started to work in. You know, in terms of people's focus is completely shifted, and I can kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. And also in terms of the delivery of design, we're so reliant on the sourcing of materials, the sourcing of goods, as you know, the supply chain. And you know, we're not only going through obviously the COVID world, we're also going through Brexit world.
Yeah.
And that's actually had an immediate sort of a massive effect in terms of what we do within our studio. You know, we are collectors and curators of objects and antiques, and you know, this has become an incredibly difficult year. Hopefully this is a little, you know, this is all temporary issues, but in terms of potentially how we source and how we look at material is going to be slightly different as well. And in terms of the cost, you know, knock-on effect of cost of build and cost of project, you know, and the kind of the difficulties perhaps we face there as well, in terms of where we get our materials from. You know, perhaps we more localized rather than perhaps international. And then, you know, the big one for me is, you know, which is very important, and I guess it perhaps isn't a global challenge, but perhaps it is. Obviously, if you have offices around the world, is the studio and the kind of the temporary loss of culture within a studio, and kind of regaining that, getting that back, or kind of get, you know, because obviously, you know, design studios, obvious thing to say, kind of are revolve around communication and kind of an exchange of ideas. And obviously, you know, you know, that has been a massive challenge and will be a challenge going forward. You know, my fingers got really good at kind of drawing stuff on WhatsApp.
Yes.
And kind of, but you know, the smallest task in terms of you know, communicating design, you know, becomes a challenge. And I know that that's a challenge, you know, across, you know, every design studios had that, and there's lots of ways of kind of getting around that. But yeah, that's certainly been challenging. But just in terms of, you know, clients, you know, I mean, we have international clients. We have 3 Chinese clients actually, and 2 of the projects at the start of the pandemic were put on hold. And only this week, strangely enough, which is a bit of a coincidence, this talk happening, that one of those clients have come back to us and they actually want to start the project. And the key reason that they wanted to put that project on hold was that they strongly believed that we needed to be there, needed to see the site, needed to meet them in person, form that personal relationship. and obviously, we've just not been able to do that, and they've held that project for 1 year, and they finally come to the realization that actually 2021, doesn't look like this sort of necessarily easy pathway into kind of doing that, and actually we're going to have to do it a different way. We're going to have to work on this project using all the technology we can in terms of video and kind of live footage of off-site to kind of get a get a feel for it. But it's just it's just a small kind of case study in terms of, I guess, bigger picture in terms of Chris mentioned it, in terms of having people on the ground and having people that can form relationships, and particularly with Asian markets and Chinese clients in particular, and how they do business. You need to see the whites of their eyes. You need to have that conversation. You need to become, close to clients. That's obviously very important.
Yes.
So I mean, but in terms of design as well, I think what we're seeing really interesting, I guess you can view it as both challenge and opportunity, is in terms of clients are genuinely thinking about, especially within the residential and hospitality sector, in terms of space and how they want to use it now. Homes are no longer places in which we just kind of sleep and watch TV. They're now places which we work, and we need wellness, and we need places to relax, and we, this idea of space, particularly when, Chris, you mentioned it as well, opportunity to build larger scale projects in the Asian market is obviously very, very interesting, but obviously in London it's a lot more challenging, and we're seeing a big shift to move out of London and out to the countryside. We're lucky enough to be working on a couple of really beautiful schemes and projects outside of London. And the introduction of those spaces ultimately, in terms of how people live, and the challenges of understanding how people live, but that's a challenge, but also an opportunity, right? And it's an opportunity for designers to kind of have more opportunity for new business and work, because people are starting to think about how they live and moving out, and as I say, the wellness sector and working kind of office working at home, that's going to be a challenge in terms of us thinking about design. And then in terms of, I mean, I could go on. I don't want to be in terms of all the kind of the design subtleties that I guess we'll be kind of thinking about. But I think that in terms of the immediate sort of challenge we're facing at the moment is a sourcing one of material, and is material and antiques. We've not been able to go to those antique fairs, those markets, go to Paris, go to Belgium. We used to literally drive a van across to Belgium, go to all the antique houses and design houses, pick up furniture and pick up interesting, completely unique things that we find. And then, that's a real USP for us, and many designers, I think, in terms of sort of, we're kind of now glued to our screens in terms of sourcing, and it's all very tunnel vision, it's kind of in with you focused. And I think that those are the sort of, top of my head, sort of like immediate challenges that we face. And in terms of the bigger global picture, for us, it's more about keeping those clients and establishing new clients in international territories.
So Ben, your clients, because I didn't ask you at the beginning of that, because everything you said is so interesting, and actually re-endorses this feedback we've had at SBID from questionnaires, that actually getting materials through is one of the most difficult things, and there have been plenty of projects that have been mothballed because of finances and things in the procurement stages. There's delays. So that,
right.
But you work internationally, so it sounds like your UK residential projects are back on. Maybe, as you say, that's because people are now spending more time in their homes, and they're probably paying more attention to the way they feel in their homes. But has your commercial arm internationally picked up yet, or is that still a little bit stable?
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, we've been very fortunate, I have to say. We've actually managed to grow the studio in the pandemic, which has brought its own sort of issues in terms of not actually meeting in person members of staff yet. we've been lucky enough to kind of grow the studio, and so we've definitely seen in terms of our international clients, we have three main international clients. As I say, one of the international clients that their project in the UK, and that's been kind of ongoing. But the project's been delayed slightly. Where they've wanted to come to site and they've not been able to. Where in terms of the build process and procurement, that has slowed in terms of that particular project. And in terms of international projects, then yeah, it's certainly slowed and delayed. Where we were getting really good traction and where we had a presence with a couple of clients and a lot of discussion about future work, future projects. And about future opportunities, in which we were, quite far along the line in terms of potentially opening up that market to us. Lots of talk about having a satellite studio, like Chris and Zaha Hadid, in terms of having a base in Asia. There was a lot of discussion about that post COVID, but a lot of that all pretty quickly went away. One of our key major projects in Beijing, which is a 60,000 square foot residential project. We got to the point of stage 4 on that project in terms of technical design and coordination. But for procurement issues and because of financial issues with the client and how he viewed the project, the project's been put on hold. And that project's been on hold for 1 year now, although it's on paper it's designed. And in terms of what that client's doing and having key clients and individuals like that, he's put his commercial and kind of commercial and personal life almost on hold, really, in terms of just to kind of see out this period. So it's definitely stopped us, I think, in terms of in our tracks, in terms of perhaps our ambition in terms of 21, 22, 23, looking at Asia as a key market and have a base there. But it continues to be an aspiration.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. So I'm going to come on to you, Bidisha. You are, like both Ben and Chris, you travel the world. You've worked in every continent of the world. I mean, just tell us a little bit about.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I was born in Syria. I've grown up in India. I did my studies in India. Then I came to London. I worked in London, then I've been in Hong Kong. I worked in Hong Kong, back in London. So yes, I mean, between living, working and studying in different kind of continents, I have traveled in the Americas, but I can't say I've quite worked there as much. I think I have a fairly good exposure and experience in terms of different cultures and different markets and different kind of the ground realities of how people engage in those kind of, and also the big advantage I've had is I've been with Zaha Hadid now coming up to, well, a bit over 15 years, and we are an extremely multinational company. I think on last count we had 40 different nationalities, which means that at any given point, we're very agile. We can work in lots of different markets, and we always have local people with local knowledge working on those projects, which makes it very interesting, because you can bring in that international kind of understanding of procurement, of response to design, response to lifestyle. How are you going to bring all of this knowledge together, fabrication? So it's definitely been an interesting journey, and especially working in a practice like ZHA, where we really are exposed to a lot. So yeah.
That's right. And obviously, as you say, with so many staff in so many countries and so many different cultures, you probably have always got somebody within Zaha Hadid that you can reach out to, problem solve. So,
Yes, I mean, obviously in the last, say, decade or so, we've seen an extensive uptake in our portfolio in Asia and Far East, so China and Southeast Asia. I think globally, I believe Americas are still a larger market, but overall there seems to be a far more fluid and a really fast moving uptake on projects in China and Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia. We've seen a lot of interest being generated, and especially kind of in this, say, post, I think for all of us, the pandemic is going to be the center of our conversation for some time, and then throw in a bit of Brexit, and it's all getting quite interesting. But we have seen in architecture and also a lot in interiors, a massive rise in interest. And it's not just interest, things are happening, which is what we really like about working in the Asian market, is things are happening, you deliver and you learn and you move on to the next one, and you can keep building on that knowledge. And I think that's where Asia gives some really interesting opportunities, because you can really work with different projects and different clients and different scales, while Europe and UK are much more sluggish right now.
Yes.
And it's probably going to change soon, but right now, as it stands, we are not that we are specifically focusing on the Asian market, but we find that the interest there, and especially interest for high design, it's always been there. And Asia, I mean, I obviously have an Indian background, and China and a lot of Southeast Asia is very big on craftsmanship. I think that is coming back in a big way, because people are reassessing their home kind of work. Home is now going to play a big part again in our lives, because you're spending an extensive amount of your work time at home. So it's a very different work-life balance now, and which means that what Ben was referring to, kind of well-crafted furniture in terms of antiques, sustainability, craftsmanship, and also typology. This is also something which is a challenge, as Ben mentioned, but could be quite an opportunity for us as interior designers. We're best placed. You said it quite well. I mean, obviously I'm trained as an architect, but you build architecture for 50 years, and then interior design gives you the flexibility to change that internal spatial experience ever so often. So it's a way of kind of refreshing the space. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, already with the office typology and the residential typology, this is all kind of blurring. I mean, we've recently done a hostel for Hong Kong UST. And interestingly, it's going to be the first hostel in Hong Kong for a public university, which is going to work with the co-living idea. So it's getting there. It's now seeping in. It's not just a fashionable thing, which, WeWork or Collective, or it's not a boutique thing anymore. It's a big
it's definitely
phenomenon.
real.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for us, that's also quite interesting. I'm not sure if I've completely deviated now for what you asked.
No. The downside of Zoom or any of our is that only one of us can talk at the time, and all of us are chewing at the bit to add to the content.
Yeah. No,
fantastic. I mean, I do want to say that, Zaha Hadid, as architects, put the curve into a building around the world, and absolutely is renowned for that. And the fact that, you're now developing, which I know you've done for a while, but actually a reputation for interiors as well as for structures. And that's quite a big shift in itself to actually, get that reputation.
I mean, the way we've always approached work, I mean, this was something which Zaha used to really be keen on, and we have always worked in that style, is the building was never seen as a singular external facade shape form. So landscape, the architecture, and the interiors was pretty seamless, because we had a very, say, a topographical style of working. So you're right that maybe we do not articulate a lot about the interiors historically. However, if you see a lot of Zaha's old portfolio, and if you see the subsequent decades of work, we have actually always done turnkey work. And increasingly, there is much more appetite for high design interiors. And therefore, we have, over the last few years, been focusing a lot on standalone interior projects. I've over the period of time, I've done a bespoke residence, a private residence in London. You know, we've done permanent galleries. We've been doing a lot more on workspace usage. So there is definitely a appetite for that. And it's worth having that conversation also in standalone.
And I think that also helps as to, you know, what we're all talking about is that it's reputation and diversification are probably the two key elements of the future, I think. And it's all about reputation building and diversity. So I'm going to come on to say hello to Dara, who joined us just after we opened. Hi, Dara. You're on, yes, you're just mic's off. Your mic's on mute. There you go. Hi, Dara.
Hi.
Hi. So Dara, Dara Huang from DH Liberty, and Dara, you do work also in Britain and Japan, yes?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Okay. So when I looked on your website, I saw that you had some very different projects. But before maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and what you do first of all.
Okay, so I am an architect, but we do largely interiors across all asset classes globally. And we're based in London and Hong Kong, but most of our work is actually in China.
Okay, so then I just ask you, because I missed you at the beginning, you know, what do you see as the opportunities in 2021?
That would be this year. What are the opportunities? Well, let's see. I guess you could say we worked largely institutionally before. So that meant anything with a fund or a developer on like a large kind of development. And then going into COVID, we had a rise in kind of ultra high net worth. So they don't seem to pause during a pandemic where, you know, if it's institutional, they're a little bit more anti-risk or they're not really, their strategy changes. So we started working for basically really rich people. And even if it was like an institutional job, such as like we're working on a stadium, right? That was still funded by an ultra high net worth individual. So whether it was like a house or a large project, or we're looking at building right now that's privately funded by a group of ultra high net worth individuals, it seems to be skipping institutionally led money. I'm trying to like think about everything we have going on, and most of it's private work. So I think maybe that's something that hasn't stopped. And luckily with like, we're in tier 5 in London right now, but we haven't exactly, like construction hasn't stopped. So luckily, while most professions have to like take a pause, like I don't feel like construction and design had to take a pause.
I feel that from SBID's perspective, the feedback we got from designers were throughout this past year is that they had to alter the way they worked to be more online, and they missed the interaction with people. But they actually were, and they had difficulty in the delivery of materials because you couldn't get plaster in London that held up many interior progress. But other than that, work has continued and investment has continued. So I don't feel that our industry, dare I say it, has suffered as much as many other creative sectors has. But how have you how do you see the next year ahead from Brexit and from any other opportunities coming out of this pandemic?
So I guess you're thinking about like 2022. How do I see it? You know, what's really funny is with this pandemic, people really want to buy property in London. I don't know why. All of a sudden, all my friends are either saying like, oh, I want to buy a flat now, or or they want to move to the country and they want to buy a house there and they want to refurbish it. So I see a lot of opportunity in probably residential work. I think over COVID, like the first lockdown, I don't even know what number lockdown we're on right now, but But on one of the lockdowns, I was coincidentally designing a furniture line because we had done a joint venture with the developer. It wasn't like aligned with COVID. It wasn't like a master plan of mine. But I do think that the timing of it was quite good because more people are kind of focusing at home and wanting to spruce up their interiors. They have a little bit more time now. And I think even if we go back into 2022 and we're all like in a normal workforce again, I can't even imagine like squeezing into a tube, but let's say we are. I think people are still they're still like want that work-home balance and realizing that it's easier to work from home than we thought it was, and they're still going to want to focus on making their homes a little bit nicer. So I don't know, I kind of, we were never very residentially focused before. We were more commercially focused, and I think I've like recently decided to embrace my residential interior skills. It was something I was like very like, I don't know. It was something that wasn't, the reason I wasn't really like that interested in it is because from a design point of view, you can't be as, I don't know, you can't be as daring. You can't be as kind of like out there or do what you want. Or you can't, you know, a lot of times when you work institutionally, you have total control and they trust you, and you don't really, like, you have a client, but they're more the money, and then they just trust you to spend a budget. So it was a little bit more fun working commercially. But now, yeah, a lot of our focus is people's, you know, personal interiors, and I kind of like it. I like the shift. I think it's really fun. In a way, it's yeah, in a way you get like larger budgets to play with, like, you know, more things. So I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Everything's an experiment.
Exactly. Chris, you know, how do you see the opportunities from that's come out of COVID after a year of lockdown?
Well, I think it's interesting to hear everyone else's take there as well, and there's a lot of commonality between the experiences that everyone's had. And I think, like Dara, like Ben, you know, we had our busiest ever year last year as well, and then it hasn't stopped. It's just got much harder to do it. I was thinking in that moment, you know, from Singapore, we're currently working in 12 different countries, and they're all completely different from each other, and how you do the work in those places is completely different, how you make the supply chains work. So it's been, yeah, logistical and cultural challenge the last few years, but the opportunities are manifold, and they haven't stopped. We've all agreed China is booming, and it continues to do in our experience, and also there's other strong markets. The Middle East seems to be really buoyant. Saudi has got huge plans, very, very ambitious currently, and is moving at a rapid pace. And people think in terms of its plans for itself and its cultural dynamics, and that's something that we're looking at. So yeah, I think there's opportunity everywhere, and it is about how you seek it out, and how willing and able you are to engage with it fundamentally. And so I think that the challenges of that for me, just the delivery side, how you can, we interestingly, you know, Dara says she's moved into the high net worth residential space. Obviously that's been my, I wouldn't say chosen space, but that's what we've ended up doing for a long time. So she's right. It's a client base that's largely not just insulated from what happens in the world, but are more active through these periods as well. Take opportunities to be brave, and we've definitely seen, or to hunker down and do more. And we've definitely seen the benefit of that through the last year, with existing clients increasing their project base with us, and existing clients coming back with other projects, and then new clients as well. So yeah, by a degree of luck, it's been a good sector certainly to be present in through the last year.
Yeah, and I think Bidisha said it as well, in terms of the change is real as well. It's not just sort of like, oh, this might be happening. It really is. You know, we're definitely seeing it. You know. And Chris mentioned there, in terms of, you know, clients, multiple properties, multiple homes, you know, that they want the house in the countryside. You know, there is a definite sea change of thought in terms of inner city living to then living outside of London. You know, and I know obviously the markets in Asia are obviously, you know, probably doing better, but we are definitely, you know, in terms of, you know, we've never been busier and we've never had so many inquiries in regards to projects, and these projects are not necessarily London centric. And I think that that's, you know, that's really interesting in terms of people looking for architectural and interior projects that you know, for high net worth individuals where that are real life changing and life enhancing, you know, and that's a real, you know, that's a real opportunity for interior designers to kind of get, you know, to take hold of, both in the UK and obviously internationally as well. But it is definitely a real change, and I think that you know, we're certainly seeing that in actual projects rather than people actually talking about it.
Sorry,
I think so. The next question I feel like is going to be like, so where do you meet all these really rich people that want these houses? I'm joking, but I feel like people are probably wondering that. Like, so how do you meet the billionaire that wants the house in, you know, Monaco?
Personally,
I was going to say something different, so I'm going to let someone else take up where the...
Bidisha, I was just going to ask you, where do you have, you know, and it sort of ends up with Dara's question there as well, that how do you build trust? You know, when we're all morphing into different markets, into different countries and different cultures, you know, it's a little bit where we do end up being in people's lives for 6 months or a few years. And part of that is understanding how they function. And if it's a business, it's how to make money, how to allow people to move through that place, those premises safely and enjoy the experience. But if it's a home, it's how to rest and be and enjoy the space and to configure the space correctly. So how do you build the trust in a different culture in a new market?
I mean, given the breadth of experience we've had working in different cultures, and I can say the underlying factor among that, all of that, is that at a base human level, trust is built when you deliver quality, you listen, you ask the right questions, you give the right feedback, and because of being in different markets or different cultural contexts, you have the ability to adapt your thinking to fit that context. And the context, yes, could be cultural or functional, because we also are seeing, while we are also seeing residential, for example, we are seeing a huge uplift also in commercial commissions that are coming in, because a lot of the very large investments have been driven by the government, various governments investing in infrastructure, for example, or in China, for example, the Shenzhen, Guangdong area, there's a massive IT, smart cities. So there's a lot of different programs which are seeing, IT has been a massive, this last year, I think IT has been hyper accelerated in terms of being part of our lives. And I suspect interior design is going to have to make it a very, very major part of how we articulate spaces. And I think, to go back to your question on trust, whether it's an Asian client or a European or a UK-based client, we found that in the end, as long as you are honest with your feedback and you deliver the quality, it continues as a relationship. And especially in Asia, where we all tend to do business because we like each other. There is the contractual side, but that interpersonal dynamics is actually much more strong than you see in Europe and UK, because in Europe and UK, there is a certain professional distance. But in Asia, we tend to all get into each other's lives a lot more because we're a bit more, you know, and therefore, if you do build a relationship, it becomes a repeat long-term relationship. It's people don't get into the club easily, but once you are in there, people like the comfort of what is happening. And as a client and as a designer, you're kind of building on previous projects and the knowledge. We've had very good experiences in China with that. You know, Soho has been a repeat client for us. We're currently working with Sanankai, which HBA is also working on the same project that we are on. So we are actually all sharing a lot of the major client bases, and there is space for a lot of people in there. So it's kind of, yeah, so I would say it's universal, the building of trust. And also, I guess we have to have a certain stamina of understanding communication, because the style of communicating can be quite brusque in certain markets or could be ultra polite. It took me years to understand, you know, on a contract, on a site in England, what they were really saying when they say we like the idea, but. So, you know, while I'm used to in Hong Kong or China, they're just going to tell you, no, no, no.
As it is.
That's not happening. So,
Chris,
yeah.
That's really interesting. Chris, when you went to Singapore, did you experience what the same things that Bidisha's explaining there?
Yeah, absolutely. And as just said, with the you know, the dozen countries that we're currently working in, all of them have a different way of engaging with you, a different cultural context, and to do business and to communicate. So being open and receptive, and Bidisha, you know, you used the word listening. I think that's the key skill, isn't it? The key soft skill to working with this kind of clientele is being receptive, being open-minded, understanding that you're the outsider here, and you have to be dexterous, open, and engaging to build those links. Yeah, and I was just thinking to Dara's question earlier on as well, like how do you attract? I think I'm kind of joking, but for me, a lifetime's work. So I'm more interested in how you've done that in 1 year, basically.
Well, so a lot of the developers that we're working with, a lot of property, whether it's in Asia, especially if it's in Hong Kong actually, and even in London, are actually high net worth families. So in Hong Kong, it's like pretty much all of the property developers in Hong Kong, they don't only develop, but they fund, and they're family funded. So every single developer is probably one of the richest families in Hong Kong. And then in London, it holds true for a lot of the developers as well. So, you know, you've got people like British Land, and, you know, that might be like 100% institutional, but then there's kind of a, sorry, my son is having a play day right now. There's like the middle, there's like a level below, like, let's say like the British Lands of the world that aren't like publicly listed, that are really high net worth families that became property families because they had to invest their funds. So like basically all the towers and like all the institutional work we were doing, it came down to the CEO wanting us to do their houses. So the house behind me, see that? That's the CEO of West Rock. So they actually do build to rent, like outside of London, but again, they are multimillionaires. And then we just got a project for a £200 million new build house, doing the interiors with Foster's, and he was the CEO of a large, he's a developer, basically, a developer fund, and they were a family-owned company, family started. And then we are doing a penthouse, same story, CEO. So yeah, we end up doing their houses because we do the project with them, and it could be as small as a show flat, but then they really like our style and they really trust us. And then they're like, oh, this feels great. Can you then do our house? And that's kind of how we always did our residential projects. It was never like a marketing strategy to, you know, target really rich people for their houses. But, you know, it's funny because the way that I do meet my clients is very serendipitous. And I think probably the one thing we all have in common is we're very charismatic. I'm joking. It's that we do have a business tenacity to find a relationship and to hold it. So like when I started working on this stadium that's owned by a billionaire, actually the first time I met him was at a restaurant in London. And that's happened to me like time and time and time again. It's like, well, how do you get the right time and the right place? And the answer is like, I don't try, I don't know. You just like live, and you just kind of, you know, I don't know, you just kind of go through life. It's London. And I always said the nice thing about London is that money comes here. Like, we don't have to go and find it. You know, I'm actually from Orlando, Florida, which is like a tiny, well, it's not that tiny, but compared to like being in an ultra high net worth metropolitan, you know, place where people come to basically shop at Harrods. And you know, so you've got the Middle Easterns that come because it's too hot in the summer in the UAE. Then you've got the Asians that come. Well, they used to come to shop, but they stopped the whole taxation thing. I don't know if you guys know that. So you don't get tax-free anymore, which is really silly. So let's see how that changes within the next year. But it usually used to at least attract all the world's wealth. I might move to Germany next year based on that business development, but that's a joke, guys, because like it's like a lot of people are now moving to like Milan and what is it, like Munich or Berlin, because of Brexit. We have some major issues in terms of importation. So a lot of businesses are putting a headquarters in Germany so they can still trade in the EU without being taxed. And as an interior designer, where I'm making all my stuff in Italy and Portugal, like it's been like a real issue. It's almost like if I didn't, especially because I started a furniture company, if I didn't want an importation tax, I'd have to put a headquarters in Germany just so we could still freely trade. So yeah, one second, Boo Boo. I know, Boo
Just
Boo.
interrupt there, Dara, so that you can just chat to your son. And Ben, to you and ask you then, now, how, as the world has sort of changed in this last year, how do you get your clients and across cultures?
Yeah, I mean, Chris mentioned it as well, and I think Dara touched on it as well in terms of London. And I think, you know, I don't, you know, about trying to sound too London-centric, you know, it is an epicenter for design and for architecture. And I think that there is this sort of like strange natural trust from international markets in it. So we're kind of lucky that we already kind of have that level of kind of, you know, I think that there's still that buy-in to London in terms of as a design center, as a place where good design happens. And I think that Asian markets are still definitely looking towards London and London-based design studios. But the thing about trust is it is a very difficult one. I mean, you know, for us that you know, we don't have a satellite office or a secondary office and don't have feet on the ground, it's a kind of different proposition. You know, we were very fortunate to work on the project that we had in that we do have in China with an incredible client rep who was also an architect and a project manager, but was Chinese, but based in London. And in terms of completely understanding the complete nuances of relationships with Chinese and Asian clients, like you touched on it, in terms of, you know, how to approach conversation, or how to approach business, or how to communicate design, and the feedback you kind of get, having that person on your side, that mediator that can kind of like take you through the journey with the client and form relationships that way. And then, like you said, the relationships become very personal with Chinese, Asian clients once they trust you. And it can be the smallest thing as well. I find, when we've worked with them, you get the smallest thing right, or you say the right thing, or there's some kind of kinship outside of design in terms of something in regards to family or life, or some kind of feeling that you may have. There's an instant bond and connection, and it's really quite strong.
Yeah.
And I found that that forming those relationships, and sometimes it needs that intimate. Sometimes it needs that little bit of help from people that really understand that kind of look at it from both sides, in terms of have your back and are able to communicate back to you in English, versus then in terms of the Asian language and nuance as well. But as well in terms of everyone said it already, in terms of always delivering on quality, delivering on budget. About talking about finances too much. It's kind of the Asian and Chinese market. Really, it's really important that in terms of budget and cost driven.
I was just going to add to what Ben was saying in terms of relationships. We found also extensively in Asia our relationship with consultants and fabricators and suppliers. This is also extremely, fertile, because if you get it right and you get sometimes we're all working under such high pressure, and extremely kind of strict conditions, that if you have managed to work together to find the right solution for the client, that also starts building up a very strong bond of work ethic. And we found that we've been brought into projects or introduced to clients actually through consultants who may be in their framework, or even, for example, we've done one extremely bespoke house in Hong Kong, and someone else heard about it, they went and saw it, they called us. So there is that cycle also of, you know, all of us on the delivery side who have a common kinship of understanding all the hardships that's going to come with working with clients there. So that's also not something to ignore in terms of client relationships.
Yes, I agree. I do think that clients tend to take you with them around the world, and then you get introduced to the rest of the family and their investors and friends, and so it does spread and ripples. And, you know, one good project gets you 3 more. So I do think that there is a lot in that, and again, that's down to reputation and conduct and adapting to different cultures. So I should probably open up some questions and just ask each of you while we invite our audience to ask any questions. If there's anything, if I just sort of go around very quickly and briefly ask if there's anything you would like to add. I mean, it's been really interesting from my point of view to listen to, you know, sort of all corners of the world coming together, and actually just interesting to see the difference in how Brexit may have not changed or affected our industry as much as perhaps it has done or would do other industries, and also how much the pandemic didn't affect us as a creative sector as much as it has done others, like artists and, you know, the music industry and live performances. So I do feel that we're very lucky to have had this sort of growth period and reflection time. I mean, I personally feel that I've achieved more by doing less in this past year. I probably haven't run around the world as much as I definitely didn't run around the world at all, but when I compare that with doing things remotely, I've achieved much more, and I feel I've had more time to reflect, which has made my decisions much better, rather than on the hoof and sort of knee-jerk decisions. So, you know, Chris, how do you feel?
Yeah, I can echo that. I think often say I ultimately feel very blessed that, as you said, the industry hasn't suffered as much as many others have, and that's something to be thankful of. I'm sure, unfortunately, some sectors of our industry will have suffered to a degree, but it does seem from evidence here, at least, as if the market is pretty buoyant, and that's good to hear. I think we also all agree it's got hard to do that work, and look forward to the rebalancing in time. I think, like you, whilst it has been, there've been long days trying to meet the added pressures of working in this kind of context. I've also taken that time to take those blue sky moments and to strategically think about the past years, the now, and how to come out of this as well in a really positive way. So that for me has been, having spent 5 years on an aeroplane leading up to this, you know, my personal world's changed massively as a result of COVID, as everybody's has. But from a business sense, it was always looking outside, and this year's been good to take reflection professionally, as said, and to tighten everything up and improve on the service that we provide, and give a greater clarity on the roads that we want to take going forward.
Yes, that's a really good point, Chris, that instead of just churning as things happen, actually making sort of decisions and direct
get on the front foot through this time. Don't step back and be reticent because of the condition that we find ourselves in. I think it's time to sort of to double up, isn't it, and then look outward even more. I think that's the essence of this chat for me.
Yeah. We've just had a question James Journey, who's asked, how are you and your teams coping with working from home and the collaboration remotely? And can the service to the clients be the same?
It's really tough. I mean, you know, I was going to say, you know, in terms of this year, in terms of the day-to-day working in the studio, we didn't particularly talk on too much in our discussion because we're talking about big global issues. But in terms of the studio, it's one thing that's kind of, you know, one of the reasons we're in this business and in this industry, I think, I hope, is in terms of the relationships and fun that you have at work and kind of form at work. And everything, it takes twice as long to design through this type of communication. And I think that it's been a real challenge, and at times, to be honest, a real slog in terms of, you know, trying to get through, you know, at one of our busiest times and busiest periods during this year, which we're very grateful and fortunate for. But in terms of the workload, the workload almost increased because of the lack of that sort of innate sort of design interaction that you would normally have in the studio. You know, we're a 12-person team, a 12-strong person studio, and we all sit around one table. We have one big table that sits in the center of the room, and we're all inwardly facing, and we can all naturally understand what's happening across the studio, not just on your own individual projects, but across the dynamic of the studio, and have a real good sense of the, you know, the studio and the business at large, really. And I think obviously when you take away that dynamic, then it becomes much more kind of individual project focus, individual meeting focus, one Zoom call after the other, one phone call, 25 WhatsApp conversations all happening at the same time. And those are challenges, but fortunately, obviously, you know, through technology, you can get through this, and these challenges are hopefully temporary. But I think everybody is looking forward to getting back to that studio and getting back to that studio culture. So it has been tough. But I think designers have been fortunate that their tools are technology based, you know, that we're able to do everything via a computer to a certain extent. But in terms of actual sort of collaborative design and moving design forward, it's been a real challenge, to, you know, to say the least, but, you know, one that's hopefully temporary.
Yeah. Bidisha?
I think I completely agree with what Ben is saying. We've had one of our busiest years also. We've seen our order books expand massively, but with that has come the pressure to maintain that quality that you deliver, and the kind of conversations or a problem resolution you can have when 10 people are sitting across a table and you can have a quick conversation about it. Everything just takes so much longer now because, you know, my team has to allocate Zoom or Skype or Teams, and then they have to send me the PDFs beforehand. I have to review them. I have to comment. So that's one side of it. And also with the client, the idea of having like a week-long intensive workshop with your M&E consultants, your suppliers, your fabricators, everyone just sitting there and problem solving. This has again got compartmentalized. So the digital, say, software and hardware aside, in terms of just project managing the process, it is just taking so much. My days are much longer than they used to be. And
absolutely.
So yes, I think going back, it wouldn't be bad to work from home occasionally, because I have sometimes 3 a.m., 4 a.m. starts with Shanghai. But on the other hand, I'm also looking forward to just being able to look at my team and say, okay, guys, we do this. And the context, you know, as Ben was saying, when you see the work happening around, when you see me getting a call from the client and everyone's listening to it, there's not this feedback loop. I don't then have to explain to them why this day is going to be quite hard because there's X problems which have happened. Because I have to first have that conversation, then communicate it to my team, unless I purposely have them online. So much harder, but you know, it's a job which has to be done. So we kind of
do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dara, quickly, how have you found?
Well, you know, I guess like Chris, like I was on a plane a lot, so I wasn't always in the office that much. So I was always communicating with everybody on WhatsApp. That was like my main tool to kind of talk to everyone. I get all my docs sent there, my feedback is there. every project we have has a group chat on there with like what the project was. So I've got like a gazillion group chats with everybody that's on that project. And so I don't know, in a way, I kind of feel like things hadn't really changed that much in terms of being remote from the office and communicating and still doing the design process. Yeah, we do still have coordination meetings, but we are still able to meet for those. So if there's like a super large coordination, sometimes we'll have Zooms with 20 people on there and they're all just consultants, you know, but if we do need to meet externally, sometimes we do. And for me, I'm a bit of a, sounds weird, but it's like I kind of work better when I'm not distracted with a lot of people around me, because I have so much going on. I have like a lot of like internal thought that gets very easily distracted. So I kind of work better when I'm not around a whole lot of people. That sounds horrible, but it's like, I like to work. Like we just moved offices to Kensington, and I remember thinking like, God, I wish I had my own office with a door, because I tend to do the whole like open floor thing, which is great, but it also gives people the freedom to be like,
ask it.
Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, can you just pretend there's like this bubble around me? But also, I feel like I've always had this issue where I get very easily distracted. Like anything that gets thrown my way, I like look at it, even if it's like an email that pops up out of nowhere. And I think a lot of, especially my more strategic side of the team, you know, like the finance and legal people, they're very like, they have a priorities list and they kind of chomp down from the bottom, you know, bottom down. And I'm very much just somebody that likes to kind of work in my own bubble. And then if someone has a question or if something arrives, I like for them to actually WhatsApp it to me so I can get to it when I decide to. So I don't know, I kind of like the lockdown. I kind of like the whole being at home.
Benefits, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I have a son, as you saw, and you know, it's like I kind of, even though I'm upstairs and he's downstairs, I like that he has my presence in the house.
Yeah, yes, that is very nice. I know when I was practicing, my daughter was small. You know, in those days, she used to come to building sites with me, and in those days, you put her on your hip and walked around.
I've done that.
And you know, when I was refurbishing, you know, residential houses, she just came with me Monday, Wednesday and Friday, so it was easy. It was much easier then. But you know, I can't believe that the time has gone. We've actually overrun. And I just need to just say thank you so much. You've been an amazing panel today, and I think we should do it again, because we didn't have half as much time to discuss so many things, and you've each got so much value and so many different facets to this industry. So I just want to thank you, Dara, for your contribution from Kensington and from Hong Kong, Ben from Oxford and also in London, and Bidisha from around the world, but today in London, and also for sitting in for our Vice President Carr, and of course Chris, President of SBID, and all the way from sunny Singapore to take your time. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good to see you again, Chris. And nice to meet you.
See you, Ben.
Bye.
Thanks, Dara.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.